Have you ever wondered why we keep rewriting the stories of the Middle Ages? It's not just a fun hobby, it's a necessity. The Middle Ages weren't just a period in history, they are something we keep reinventing, over and over again, to understand our present and shape our future. Imagine this. In 1958, a writer named Terence H. White published a book called The Once and Future King. It was a fantastical retelling of the story of King Arthur, a legend that has been reinvented countless times. Just a couple of years later, in 1960, the musical Camelot hit Broadway, bringing Arthur's story to a whole new audience. Then, in 1961, John F. Kennedy became the President of the United States. His administration was so idealized that his wife, Jackie Kennedy, later referred to his presidency as a brief shining moment of Camelot. This connection between a medieval legend and modern politics shows how the Middle Ages are constantly being reimagined to fit our current needs and dreams. But the idea of invention in the Middle Ages wasn't always seen as a bad thing. In medieval Latin, the word inventio meant something positive. It was about discovering or uncovering something valuable, like a wise argument or a holy relic. For example, the Empress Helena, mother of the Roman Emperor Constantine, was said to have invented the true cross, meaning she discovered it. This wasn't about making things up. It was about finding hidden truths. However, during the Renaissance, the meaning of invention started to change. It began to carry a negative connotation, suggesting fabrication or deceit. But even today, the word invent still has positive connotations when it comes to science and technology. An inventor is someone who creates something new and useful, not someone who makes up lies. In 1991, a historian named Norman Cantor wrote a book called Inventing the Middle Ages. He argued that the Middle Ages have always been a canvas for modern inventions, a way for us to explore our own anxieties and dreams. Cantor believed that the Middle Ages were reinvented in modern times because earlier scholars had painted them as a dark and superstitious era. But in the late 19th and 20th centuries, new ideas from thinkers like Emil Durkheim and Sigmund Freud allowed us to see the Middle Ages in a new light. We started to recognize the complexity and richness of medieval society, and we began to see it as a mirror of our own world. Cantor highlighted several historians who he believed were key in this reinvention. For example, F.W. Maitland, a British legal historian, saw medieval English law as a functional system that served the needs of society, rather than a backward and irrational set of rules. Maitland's work was revolutionary because it showed that the Middle Ages were not just a time of darkness, but a period with its own logic and structure. Another example is R.W. Southern, who Cantor called the Once and Future King. Southern's books, like The Making of the Middle Ages, helped shape how we understand the medieval world. But Cantor was disappointed that Southern didn't push for more radical changes in the study of medieval history. Instead, Southern's ideas were often watered down by his students, who fit them into the established view of the Middle Ages. Cantor also discussed other historians like C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien, who were not just scholars but also storytellers. They brought medieval ideas to a wider audience through their fantasy works, making the Middle Ages accessible and exciting to people who might not otherwise have been interested in history. The Middle Ages continue to be reinvented in our own time. From historical novels to TV shows like Game of Thrones, we keep finding new ways to explore and reinterpret this fascinating period. By doing so, we not only learn about the past, but also gain insights into our present and our future. So, why do we keep reinventing medieval history? Because it helps us understand ourselves and the world we live in. The Middle Ages are not just a distant memory. They are a living, breathing part of our cultural heritage, and they will keep evolving as long as we do. 20 years after the 9/11 attacks and the 2008 financial crisis, the way we look at history, especially medieval history, has changed. In the UK, a trend called retro-medievalism has emerged, where the Middle Ages are being reimagined and repackaged in various ways. This trend is seen in heritage sites, entertainment, cultural industries, and even politics. For example, the Scottish independence referendum in 2014 was linked to historical events like the Battle of Bannockburn. Celebrations of important historical events like the signing of the Magna Carta are often wrapped in national pride. This trend raises important questions for medieval studies in the UK. How do these new interpretations of the Middle Ages fit into the educational goals of students coming to the UK? How can these reinvented versions of the Middle Ages be useful for medieval scholarship and history? In the past, historians like Norman Cantor played a significant role in shaping how we think about the Middle Ages. Cantor's work, while influential, was primarily aimed at an American audience and did not anticipate the trend towards global and comparative history. His version of the Middle Ages was culturally isolated and began in the 11th century, without much consideration for archaeological evidence or other scientific methods. However, in the late 20th century, a large project called the Transformation of the Roman World, TRW, began to change how we understand the early Middle Ages. This project used a lot of archaeological evidence and took a comparative approach, looking at the period from different perspectives. Despite his limitations, Cantor was always willing to engage with new ideas in history, and even advised the Royal Historical Society in the UK. In the 21st century, new methods and interdisciplinary approaches are being used to reinvent medieval history. Chris Wickham, for example, has written extensively about the early Middle Ages, emphasizing the diversity of societies and the importance of local and regional differences. He argues that after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the lack of a centralized tax system actually improved the lives of peasants in some areas. In the East, however, strong states like Byzantium and the Islamic caliphates continue to thrive. Peter Sarris, another historian, focuses on the period from 500 to 700, a crucial time in the development of Latin Christendom, Greek Christendom, and Islam. Sarris highlights the role of religion in shaping these new empires and the impact of the plague on population and economic structures. He suggests that religious beliefs were a powerful force that united people and motivated them to action. Wendy Davies's work on medieval economic growth in Ireland provides a local example of how new archaeological evidence is changing our understanding of the past. She points out that the number of known early medieval sites in Ireland has increased dramatically due to road building and construction projects. These sites, including many early watermills, suggest that there was significant economic growth in Ireland during this period, driven by both ecclesiastical communities and Viking trade. At a larger scale, the University of Leicester's project on the impact of diasporas on Britain is a prime example of interdisciplinary teamwork. This project involves historians, geneticists, archaeologists, linguists, and social psychologists working together to understand how migrations of Anglo-Saxons and Scandinavians shaped Britain. By combining different types of evidence, such as DNA analysis, place names, and linguistic studies, the project aims to create a more detailed and accurate picture of these migrations and their impacts. These new approaches to medieval history show that the Middle Ages are not just a distant past, but a dynamic and ever-evolving field of study. By using new methods and working across disciplines, historians are uncovering new insights and making the Middle Ages more relevant and engaging for students and scholars alike. In the world of history, sometimes the most unexpected sources can offer fascinating insights. Take, for example, the British National Party's BNP claim to have conducted groundbreaking research on the ancestry of the British population. The BNP argues that the ancestors of most British people have been in the region for a very long time, and that the impact of immigrants from the early medieval period was minimal. This claim, while controversial, highlights the complexities and risks involved in historical and genetic research. Research, especially in fields like genetics and archaeology, is a process of constant discovery and revision. Findings are often critiqued, and sometimes completely overturned. This is especially true when it comes to historic DNA studies, where new technologies and methods can lead to new interpretations. The University of Leicester's project on the roots of the British is a prime example of this. Funded by the Leverhulme Trust, the project aims to understand the genetic makeup of the British population over time. However, the project also carries risks, as any research that touches on identity and heritage can be misused or misinterpreted. One of the key challenges in this type of research is the potential for conflicting findings. For instance, the study of ancient DNA from archaeological remains can reveal different patterns of maternal and paternal lineage. Maternal DNA, passed down through mitochondria, can tell us about the female ancestors, while paternal DNA, found in the Y chromosome, can trace male lineage. These findings might not always align, leading to a more complex picture of population history. The project also involves linguistic and textual analysis, which can provide insights into the long-term stability of immigrant populations. For example, the study of place names, medieval texts, and oral traditions can reveal how migration and foreignness were perceived and remembered over time. Even if the research doesn't produce clear or definitive answers, the process itself is valuable, as it helps us understand the limits of our knowledge and the complexity of the past. One of the most compelling examples of how science can uncover historical truths is the story of Edith, an Anglo-Saxon princess who became the wife of the German king Otto I. Edith died in 946 and was buried in Magdeburg Cathedral. In 2008, her tomb was reopened and some ancient bones were discovered. However, it was unclear if these bones were truly Edith's. To solve the mystery, a team of osteoarchaeologists from the University of Bristol analyzed the teeth, focusing on the isotopes in the tooth enamel. These isotopes can reveal where a person lived during their childhood, as they are influenced by the local environment. The analysis confirmed that the woman whose teeth these were had indeed lived in Wessex during her childhood, strongly suggesting that the remains were those of Edith. The bones were then returned to Magdeburg and reinterred with great ceremony. Another area where science is reshaping our understanding of the past is in the study of medieval plagues. For many years, historians debated whether the Black Death was primarily a bubonic plague spread by rats. Recent DNA analysis from mass graves has provided strong evidence that the plague was indeed bubonic. This finding has implications for understanding other plagues, such as the Justinianic plague, which ravaged the Mediterranean world from the 540s to around 750. If the Justinianic plague was also bubonic, it suggests that population growth was severely impacted for 2 centuries, with far-reaching social and economic consequences. Climate history is another field where interdisciplinary research is yielding new insights. By combining data from ice cores, tree rings, and historical texts, researchers can reconstruct past climate conditions and their impact on human societies. For example, a study by a team of historians and atmospheric scientists found that severe winters in the early medieval period, as recorded in Frankish annals, corresponded with volcanic activity that blocked sunlight and caused colder temperatures. This environmental data helps explain why population growth was stagnant during the period of the Justinianic plague, and why there was a gap in severe winters between 763 and 821. This gap in severe winters coincided with the life of Charlemagne, a key figure in early medieval European history. Charlemagne, who ruled from 748 to 814, faced significant challenges, including famines and political opposition. However, the favorable environmental conditions of his time, such as a growing labor force and better harvests, likely contributed to his ability to surmount these challenges. The end of the plague and the absence of severe winters also promoted stability and connectivity across the Mediterranean world, facilitating communication and trade between different empires. Charlemagne's reign was marked by a series of significant events and decisions that shaped the future of Europe. His interactions with the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world, as evidenced by the gift of an elephant from the Caliph, highlight the complex diplomatic and cultural exchanges of the time. Charlemagne's efforts to gather information and strengthen his rule through religious and political means are well documented in contemporary sources. Writing a biography of Charlemagne is a challenging task, given the limited and often fragmentary nature of the sources. However, recent scholarship has made it possible to explore Charlemagne, his inner life and personal experiences in more detail. For example, his relationships with family members, his religious beliefs, and his approach to governance all provide valuable insights into his character and motivations. By examining these aspects, historians can offer a more nuanced and comprehensive portrait of this important historical figure. In the end, the study of Charlemagne and his times is an ongoing process of discovery and interpretation. Each new piece of evidence, whether it comes from genetics, climate science, or historical texts, adds to our understanding of the past and helps us appreciate the complexity and richness of medieval history. The task of the historian is not just to uncover facts, but to weave them into a compelling narrative that resonates with both scholars and the general public. In the world of history, Leopold von Ranke is a big name. He was a German historian who wrote about the past in a very detailed way, focusing on facts and evidence. Even though he lived a long time ago, his ideas about how to write history are still important today. Ranke believed that history should be all about the facts, even if those facts might not make for a very exciting story. He said that a strict representation of facts, be it ever so narrow and unpoetic, is beyond doubt the first law of writing history. This means that when you write about the past, you should stick to what really happened, even if it's not very interesting. Ranke was very interested in understanding how things really were in the past. He used the phrase, wie es eigentlich gewesen, which means how it actually was. This idea was very important for him. He wanted to know the truth about the past, not just stories that people made up. For example, when he talked to a translator named Philip Ashworth, he said that he really respected Sir Walter Scott, a famous writer who wrote historical novels. However, he was disappointed that Scott sometimes changed the facts to make his stories more exciting. Ranke thought that this made it hard to use Scott's work to understand what really happened in the past. Even though Ranke is known for his strict focus on facts, he didn't have a big influence on how people wrote about the early Middle Ages. The early Middle Ages are the years from about 500 to 1000 AD, and many historians who studied this period were already careful about using sources and evidence before Ranke came along. One of the most important historians of the early Middle Ages was a man named Georg Waits. Although Ranke is sometimes called Waits's mentor, Waits was more influenced by another historian named Georg Heinrich Pertz. Pertz was a senior historian at the MGH, which is a place where historians collect and study old documents. When Pertz wrote about Ranke in his autobiography, he didn't talk about Ranke's ideas much. Instead, he just mentioned that Ranke was good at walking, and had useful connections to important people. So, while Ranke is famous for his ideas about sticking to the facts and understanding how things really were, his influence on the study of the early Middle Ages was not as big as you might think. Historians who studied the early Middle Ages were already being careful about their sources and evidence, and they didn't need Ranke to tell them to do it. Nonetheless, Ranke's ideas about the importance of facts and evidence are still important today, and they remind us that when we write about the past, we should always try to get it right. Historical novels, like the ones we've explored, blend fact with fiction, creating a unique way to tell stories about the past. Authors like Manzoni, Chateaubriand, Sismondi, and Wilkie Collins used their knowledge of history to write stories that not only entertain but also offer insights into the times they depict. Chateaubriand's Les Martyrs is a grand tale of Christian and pagan worlds colliding at the end of the Roman Empire. The story of Eudore and Cymodocée is filled with adventure, love, and a deep sense of religious purpose. Chateaubriand wanted to show how Christianity could bring light to a dark world, and his novel became a powerful tool for the Catholic revival in the 19th century. Sismondi, on the other hand, wrote Julius Caesar with a different goal. As a Genovan Calvinist, he was critical of the Catholic Church and wanted to show the social and economic realities of the late Roman Empire. His novel is more grounded in the everyday struggles of people like Felix and Julia, who face oppression and injustice. Sismondi's work is a serious attempt to educate his readers about the early Middle Ages, presenting a world that is both familiar and foreign. Wilkie Collins's Antonina takes a different approach. He avoids using real historical figures, focusing instead on fictional characters to represent the spirit of the age. Collins was careful to get the details right, drawing on his own visits to Rome and the works of historians like Gibbon. His novel is a vivid portrayal of the Gothic siege of Rome, showing the tensions between Romans and Goths, and the complex social structure of the city. These authors show us that historical novels can be more than just entertainment. They can be a way to explore the past, to understand different perspectives, and to imagine what life might have been like in another time. Whether through the grandeur of Chateaubriand's vision, the social critique of Sismondi, or the detailed realism of Collins, these novels offer a rich and engaging way to learn about history. In the end, historical novels remind us that the past is not just a collection of facts and dates. It is a living, breathing world filled with people who loved, fought, and dreamed just like we do today. These stories help us connect with that world, and perhaps in understanding it, we can better understand ourselves.